Okay, so then there's private corporations, and you're right that there is a range there. So a person could be a good employer and share a lot with their employees. Actually, ironically, Howard Schultz, who's a terrible on politics, is actually a pretty good boss. And has shared a lot more with his employees than other corporations have chosen to do. And it's partly because he's a founder. Even if when they became a public corporation, he retained enough power to be able to be decent to not only his employees, but to the farmers that he works with in Latin America, etc. It's so ironic because he seems like such a jerk right now publicly. But anyway, in a private corporation, you do have a range. But once you have the range, you're right, there'll be plenty of people at the top who go, no, I'm not gonna share with my employees at all. I'm gonna maximize every penny because I want to, right?
None of the processes that you mentioned are actually democratic. And that's precisely what I'm saying.
That's right, I'm gonna get to those.
So, you know, I was fine with never talking about TYT after those first couple of years. I didn't have all that great of a time, but, you know, there was no reason I would ever have come forward.
Can you plant us like year-wise what this year was?
2013 through 2015, that little period of time when I worked there. And then I came back on board with Jimmy in 2015. He was still very friendly. And we started to do like remote stuff when we went to a few Bernie rallies. We actually got picked up by a Rolling Stone for a story we did at a Las Vegas caucus site. That was kind of exciting. Went to a Trump rally. So I was still
living in Las Vegas with Jimmy Dore and Hank Thompson.
Yeah. I was so tired, man. I was chasing him around. This is actually a story I'm going to tell here. And I've never told this story before, but so TYT had gotten the big, or at least the 4 million by that point, at least. And so they had expanded somewhat into their company structure and stuff. And so Jimmy was able to get TYT to pay for a lot of the expenses and stuff because he was still closely involved with TYT. And so I was kind of like orbiter to it, very close because I'd been in the company before, you know, trusted guy in the company and stuff. And my day rate for the Vegas stuff was $300, which is pretty low for cameraman, field producer, field editor, you know, long days, 10, 12-hour days, running around on your feet, carrying around camera equipment, backpack, laptop, all this stuff.
That's a lot of jobs for.
Not exactly lucrative, but 300 is a decent day's rate. And Jack,
I mean, it's also as a contractor, so like you're gonna have to pay taxes on that. So
yeah, right.
Really the full
thing. It was TYT going to pay me instead of Jimmy. And so Jack, the corporate guy that Cenk is pals with, and brought him in to like formalize a lot of their corporate structure. Invited, asked if I could come in for a meeting to talk about this upcoming trip, and he talked me down to $250 a day. So I just remember being like, really? You made me come in here so you could like get $150 from me? Like, that's nuts. So what is, like, you know, is a company bottom line really that tight that you got to squeeze like that? That was one of those first like, oh, this is not cool. You know, I wasn't surprised. I think, I don't want to speak for everybody at TOT, but I knew it wasn't a high respect environment overall. You know, I had seen the sausage get made, but like I said, it wasn't something I was going to make a big stink about. I knew,
like, by high respect environment, like how would you compare it to, you know, stereotypes of Hollywood, how Hollywood was kind of changing in that time, and how a so-called progressive organization you might think would be versus like what you were experiencing?
Well, I can't say I've had direct experience with other outfits that much, but you know, I think just the generalized feeling that your contributions aren't, you just feel very replaceable. You just feel like there at any minute you might, not that you get fired like willy-nilly here and there, but although I was fired willy-nilly the day I did get laid off, but in 2020, but yeah, like just low pay, you kind of stressed out a lot of the time. Just you're asked to do more than you really can, and kind of you know, just sort of a division of the distribution of respect just wasn't really, didn't seem real equitable, I guess it might maybe describe it that way. You know, but nothing like completely untoward, or nothing that would be like a documentary subject or anything like that. You know, just one of those like, well, okay, you know, whatever, it's fine. Hope they do good work. Hope we can get money out of politics. Like that, yeah, like
Cenk wasn't giving you like noogies in the bathroom and like confronting.
Yeah, nothing like that.
Like,
yeah,
no,
right.
like, no.
Yeah.
And you know, to be fair, like there was like Anna and Jimmy had that like one moment where there's like a sexual harassment sort of thing, and so like they're like other
Right.
people had those sort of experiences there, like to be clear. And I've had like some like moments with Jimmy Dore that I've talked about as well, right? So like, it wasn't all hunky dory for everyone, and that very much depended on your identity and like how you wandered throughout in the workplace and your the sort of hierarchy of like, are you the security guard or are you the COO or the CEO or something like that, or something like that? Yeah.
Let me tell you a perfect story or a quick story that will exactly capture it. There was a round of firings in 2018, and one of the people who was laid off at that point was brought into the room and told they were losing their job, and the person who fired them called them the wrong name. I mean, what else is there to say? Like, that's the sort of respectful like environment you get. Like, they don't even, the person firing you doesn't know your name, calls you somebody else's name.
I thought I'd heard a
pretty
story.
ruthless.
I thought I'd heard a story where they had just like forgotten to tell someone that they were let go, and so they were like still there in like a different part of the office.
Well, they'll find out when the check stops, or when the money stops showing up. Yeah, and I mean, if we could get into the union stuff, I mean, I was working at Cenk's company, classified as part-time while working 40-hour weeks for zero benefits. So that's the sort of respect we're talking about now. Like, I'm trying to keep it respect. Like I'm trying to keep it on the Trader Joe's. I'm trying to sort of keep it sort of fair, let's say, about the earlier days. But in terms of why we unionize and why I'm doing this project, is because Cenk violated some massive ethical boundaries with the employment conditions that drove us to unionize, using classification to deny people benefits. In my case, he had me classified as an independent contractor. So like, I'm very much leaping ahead here a little bit, but like this is the answer to the respect question, is that like, I couldn't go to a doctor while working full time. I mean, I guess I could have gone, just to be technically clear, it's not like Cenk prevented me from entering hospitals, but I worked full time for his company and had zero health insurance. And when I complained about it over the course of 6 or 7 months.
And did you have like vacation days?
Well, let me just back up a little, because I kind of leaped ahead a little bit. So now I stayed in touch with TYT. People knew me there. The head of the editing department was familiar with my work, and I had reached out and said, "Hey, I'm struggling to find work. I'd been doing Postmates in my late 30s, and I'm doing pizzas, and no disrespect to that field, obviously, but I was just so miserable, and I was starting to have like anxiety, like weird. I've always had depression and strange issues, all connected to undiagnosed autism, not understanding what autism was." In a pretty rough mental headspace. And so I was like just desperate for any kind of job I could get. And TWT brought me on to do a independent contractor thing, like a brief, like after those round of firings in 2018, I didn't know about all the stuff that had gone on, but they had me edit something for Nerd Alert for $35 an hour on my own equipment, sitting here at this computer. I was totally okay with it being an independent contractor. It would have been weird to be hired to be an employee for one, 3-day edit or something like that. No problem at all. And that's worth pointing out, because it contrasts to then in November, editing department called me up. "Hey, want to start on Monday?" "Sure. Cool. See you Monday. The rate's $21.63. That's not negotiable. See you on Monday." And the first thing they make me do is sign a contract that calling myself an independent contractor that very clearly says no benefits, no health care, no paid leave, no family, nothing. And it lists every benefit you don't get. Those contracts are very thorough. And immediately I'm like, well, they didn't really do much about this low respect environment that I knew I was walking into. I was grateful for the work. I needed something stable because I was having difficult mental issues. I knew I was very good at editing. It was a very easy job interview that took about 45 seconds, right? Guy called me and told me when it starts. That's about the best you could hope for. And I was so happy to finally maybe be able to catch my breath with some money and some ability to pay up some of my rent debt. I've been graced with a very, very generous roommate who doesn't want to see me go homeless. And so, I'm going to cry if I talk about it. That's why I'm going to do a fundraiser to try to finish the movie. But most of the fundraiser is to pay my roommate back all this money. I owe him so much money. I owe him tens of thousands of dollars. I'm crying about it. Sorry. Oh, fuck. So I have strong, heavy emotions that I don't have a great ability to prevent others from seeing. Among the reasons I'm unemployable. So anyway, so where I lost track. Oh, so now I'm working and I'm doing video editing and I'm thinking like, okay, you know what? Maybe in a month or two, I'm gonna, just keep doing a good job. I'm really good at editing. I knew half the people that work there. I care greatly about doing good work. I bring good creative energy. I was massaging marijuana. If people remember seeing a guy's hands rubbing the lizard, I was the lizard rubber. But I was like, do I not deserve to get paid for Christmas? I've been working full time at this company for since October. Like, why don't I get paid for New Year's? Why am I not getting paid for Memorial? Like, why are other people getting health insurance and I'm not? It's because I'm an independent contractor. The person whose role I was filling was a full-time regular employee, right? So like the job on Friday was full-time employee. When I show up on Monday, it's an independent contractor job. That's shady, man. That is over the line. Excuse me, that is so far over the line. But I would have been okay if it had only been a couple of months and they said, okay, you know what? We'll bring you on full-time, get you benefits. You're good to go. And that would have been crappy, but I would have been, as I wrote in one of my pieces on Substack, I would have let that skeleton stay buried. After complaining all the time, you can tell I'm not a quiet person. I got a meeting with HR in May of 2019 now. And so I just expressed I don't know why the company's taking this risk, that this is really stupid that you're doing this to yourself. Why would you not why would you allow this to be a possibility that this might get out? Hint, hint. And also why can't I get healthcare? I'm concerned about you and I'm concerned about me. Can you just treat me the same way you're treating all the other workers who I'm sitting next to, who get health insurance and paid days off for $21.63 an hour? I was paid less than every other editor. People who got benefits were making more than me, not by a lot, but it was just ridiculous. And if they had said, oh man, you called us out. Oops, our bad. We'll fix it. Here's a bunch of money. Sorry for all those days you didn't get. I would have been like, well, you called on your bullshit, but at least you made right when I called you out and we're good. But instead, and this is where this thing gets really nuts, is they changed my classification from 1099 independent contractor to a W-2 employee, but they called me part-time temporary. And I was working 40-hour weeks. And I have proof on my Substack that TYT's threshold for part-time is 30 hours. It's not it's not okay. I was working 40 hours a week on company property, on company business, doing company work, everything that indicates I was a full-time employee the entire time. Still no benefits. Well, let me say, they did auto enroll me in a retirement thingy for which TYT did zero contributions, and the only contributions were my money. And I eventually cashed it out for $80 when I realized they were taking $5 a month out of it, a year or two after I left after it ended. So I don't know if I'd call that a benefit, that I gave some financial company $80 and so that I could keep some of it myself. So by this time though, I had started, the union actually began, the first union attempt was a year prior. As I mentioned, there was that round of firings, right, that we talked about a little bit. And before that happened, a small group had already reached out to IATSE. And this is written about in the Politico piece about the story. Because the workers showed those emails to the journalists, they confirmed the evidence, not just their word, but they had the emails still. And IATSE was receptive, and IATSE was interested in unionizing the post-production crew, because that's what IATSE does. They do stage and post, as well as graphics. So the union effort began a year before I woke it back up. It got frozen by that round of firings. They all got shied away and they said, all right, we're not going to do it. And then I come back to the company and then everybody sees my situation and I'm not a wilting flower, right? So I'm yo, I'm going to wake this union up. I'm not putting up with this shit. I got three choices. I can quit, I can take it, or I can unionize. And so I chose to unionize. At least I didn't know it was going to work. I had no idea where it would end up. But I knew I had to try something. It just really irritated. I was really annoyed and frustrated and stressed by the feelings of not being able to go to a doctor. As we've been talking in the news just this last few weeks about health insurance and health insurance companies, where people are sort of collectively having this moment of class threaded consciousness that it's like, we're all under threat. Like, this is literal violence of a sort. We don't call it the same kinetic violence that this guy's going to do years in jail for. But the cops chase that guy down, but they're not chasing down the health insurance executives who are leaving big piles of bodies behind them every single fucking day in this world. And that itself is a cosmic injustice. So like, I had to experience this feeling of extra threat, extra worry, extra layers of help. And I needed some therapy. I needed some help with my mental issues and stuff because I was having a hard time. I was lucky enough to be able to see a therapist with my dad helping me once a month for a therapist. But, I needed to see a doctor. Like, I don't know why I need to explain that. Not that you're asking me to explain it, but like, I feel like almost embarrassed that I have to be like, oh, may I see a doctor, sir? May please, Cenk Uygur. And the guy doing this is Cenk Uygur. Like, come on.
We're talking in the light. This is, mid-December in 2014, where you have 2024. Where we're talking right now. I mean, right, where you have this the alleged Luigi Mangione shooter of the United Healthcare CEO worker, and these are definitely conditions that TYT was in. If you give the most benefit of the doubt, maybe like it was expensive to have you, and at the time California didn't really have like as the laws around contracting that they have right now that have like changed a lot and in some ways been influenced by Uber and Lyft and other companies that wish to exploit those laws.
Yeah, I think too.
Yeah, exactly. But even if you give the benefit of the doubt, like, oh, these are expenses that we can't incur or whatever. This is the system that we're in, where the whims of your employer are tied to your health outcomes, be they physical or mental or, like any of these types of things that we have the ability to care for. We have modern medicine for everyone to supposed to have access to. And the richest country in the world, especially not even in like the richest countries have these, like generally countries have these because we're a very rich planet right now. So it says a lot to things systemically, but it also says to like the state of the way you're treated. I don't mean to invalidate that, but I think there's like a lot of parallels that I think are just like relatable to other people's experiences, to what they have gone through, and just the system we live in, I think is super relatable to everyone.
Yeah. And I hope that more people kind of realize or understand it as like dangerous. Like it's not just about fairness or being able to afford healthcare, quote unquote. It's about safety. It's about literal danger and feeling safe and being and the respect that you, and because it's through your employer. And I know Cenk would rather not have to be an employer or a health insurance provider as an employer. I'm confident he probably still feels that way. But like the TYT guy is the one doing this, though. You know what I mean? Like it's an explicitly political outfit with although it's a for-profit media company. And something you'd said earlier too regarding like pay scales is like they kind of trade on that a bit, where they kind of know that you're willing to take lower rates and lower pay and lower benefits and stuff overall because it's sort of the activist side of that world. It's
a lot of that type of like activist, human emotion centered work tends to be like that. Whereas part of the draw of finance is like, hey, you're going to be a killer, but you're going to make killer money.
Right. Yeah. For having meetings, for looking at computers, and making decisions. Yeah. Wow. Big deal. I mean, I guess that's what video editing is, I suppose. But looking at a computer making decisions. But anyway, so like as this is happening, though, I'm like, I'm going to wake up this union, or at least see what happens. And then they shift me to part-time temporary status, still no benefits. And I'm starting to have conversations with people, though. And I'm starting to, and we're close. Editors were close because we had to know each other's jobs. We were backup for everybody. So I knew how to do everybody's job there.
We were able to understand other people who were editors who were in the situation, because at least for context,
Mhm.
I had heard rumblings of things, but you are naturally keeping hush about any sort of a
Yeah.
union, but even like the working conditions are experientially wise different. Because I'd started as a contractor at TYT, but I was that because I was working remotely because I was in college most of the time.
Mhm.
And sometimes I was working, sometimes I wasn't. It was really just like you know, I it wasn't until 2018 when I graduated that I was even on production side. I was doing marketing and support actually. And so those would really just be like I report my own hours where I'm answering support tickets from members, or I'm helping with Shop TYT or other sort of like fundraising things like that. And that was kind of my door in like member sort of engagement things. That was kind of my door in so that when I graduated, I could start working on production. And I was able to do that around the same time. I was around that same time, notably, I've talked about this like deal with the devil I made, where
Mhm.
in order to, I don't think, basically like people were being laid off around that time in 2018. That was around the time I was shifting into a different department. And so like people were shuffling around and moving, so that was happening. I was taking on a bunch of different shows. I got to work with John Iderola on developing out Damage Report, which is one of my favorite things I got to do there. I got to work with Hasan Piker on developing those Facebook breakdown scripts. So that was really nice too. And there's some other hosts there I was working with that were great.
He owes you
Um,
money, by the way. I have a side quest to get Hasan to pay checks to everybody that worked on his breakdown videos. Let me say that he doesn't. I'm not saying I know he know. I'm like he affirmatively owes you money. I'm saying like I would love to see him write some big checks to everybody that helped his success get so big. Social solidarity, Hasan. All this hard work. When people talk nepotism, what they mean is that Hasan had access to the creative professionals at his uncle's media company who built the foundation for his initial. He wouldn't have been able to build his career as fast as he did without all that. And he's talented, and he worked his butt off to get a lot of it. He put in tons of hours. Genuinely, really does a lot of work over the years. So anyway, sorry, I had to
no. Actually, I think that's actually really interesting because like the Hasan point was something I want to talk. The Hasan point was something I wanted to talk about. There was a clip I wanted to play, but
Yeah.
before we get back to kind of like employment conditions, everyone kind of comes into TYT in this similar way. I've spoken to a lot of people who have worked with TYT, and a lot of people join really late. Like Jessica Burbank's been on the show,
Mhm.
Ravana, Mondale Robinson, like a lot of different folks have been Ben Dixon. They all, like a lot of people have like had kind of like media things going on, and then they join TYT as contributors, and that's kind of their leg in. And there are other people who, especially in those earlier years, pre 2016, especially Jr, Jesus, John, Anna, really, we're thugging it out. Like it was just like kind of like getting where it fit. And Hasan, yes, he is Cenk's nephew. Everyone loves teasing him about that, and he's definitely privileges about that because Hasan was like, I was learning a lot of like on air things from Hasan and things like that, but he was learning a lot about like the politics, the argumentative structure, the debating stuff from me. He was learning a lot of like the editing and that kind of structure and thinking about that from his editors, from which you were one of them from time to time. And so like, yeah, there's definitely some credit to be done there. That being said, I still talk to Hasan fairly often from time to time, and so we have a good
Yeah.
friendship. But like
He's
during
a
this
good guy.
entire
Like, sorry, I mean, I knew he would come up to me because I was a stand-up, and he wasn't anybody makes you sound, but like this was before bro tips, right? So he was just like Cenk's nephew wandering around when he was doing like the ad sales and stuff. Which, by the way, on my Twitter, and it's been going around a lot, is that the clip where he talked about his working conditions, saying
this
that
is what I want to get to.
yeah.
This is actually what I want to get
All
to
right.
actually.
So
like
to lead into that, but like he would come up to me and be like, talk comedy. Like when you're a comedian and there's just a thing that happens where people just want to sort of experience funniness around a comedian. And so he'd be like, oh, what's your favorite? So he would kind of do that sort of thing. And it was sort of, innocent, and then I think we're lucky that we're very lucky to have him on our side and reaching the audience that he's reaching and doing the work that he does and having, he definitely was an eye roll generator at the company. People were just kind of like, oh, there's that guy, that boss's nephew. But we didn't realize his working conditions were also pretty jacked up from his own uncle. And I'm glad to hear you're still in touch. I was looking for his phone number the other day because I wanted to text him about I used to text him a bunch about getting his script done. I was there when he was on his way out at TYT because he was already sort of big. And it would be really annoying because we'd see him streaming and I'd need him to respond to something but I know he's busy. Also, I know he was making way more money per month.
And I would have to
Twitch than he was per year at TYT. And I honestly, like, for my project, like I actually ran into Hasan once when I was doing Postmates. He was sitting at some restaurant, like a pickup.
So really fast. I want to play.
Let's do it.
Clip because Hasan's eating in this, so it's sort of relevant. But yeah, when we're talking about Hasan's working conditions, this is a surprise to me here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's watch this.
I interned there, and I wanted to move to Los Angeles anyway.
Mm-hmm. Of course, there's talking about TYT.
Yeah.
I interned there, and I wanted to move to Los Angeles anyway. Mm-hmm. And my uncle was like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to hire someone and skirt some serious labor regulations because his family. Sure. I worked at the Young Turks and I made I think my first year salary was $21,000. It was under the. I got money back from the government, so I started doing ad sales at the Young Turks, and they needed someone to do direct ad sales, and they had no idea. They had nothing. They had no program dedicated to selling ads and inventory. So I basically built that out. Right. Advertisement, sales, and operations in its entirety.
Oh, wow.
Because I got on Facebook and they were like, you're just going to do all of our Facebook stuff.
Wow.
You're demoted. No longer are you doing sales. You're going to do Facebook.
Well, that's because your uncle was letting everybody steal your sales deals too.
That's true.
His uncle would let him massage a sales deal to the last thing, then someone would swoop in and close it and take the commission.
Oh, yeah.
And his uncle would be like, them's the break. So it's interesting because his uncle basically at this point tries to whiplash this, basically be like, I did all this to motivate you.
Are you on good terms with your uncle?
Yeah. I still love him, but I mean he was
but it's insanity.
I knew some of this. I knew that he was the plucky salesperson that wasn't going absolutely great with him.
Let's get your reaction, man. How did you feel seeing what's your response?
I hadn't seen this clip before. Apparently it was from 2021, and it gives a lot of clarity because I had worked with Hasan and Will actually. And Will, I will sometimes rate his streams and watch his streams as well. We're less close, but we're still definitely on really good terms. It was really fun to work with and to produce with and to learn with. It was really some of the most fun times of my 20s were working with those people because we were similarly bro-y, but also similarly, Will kind of still learning in his own way and Hasan learning in his own way and me kind of learning in my own way about leftist politics and getting there on our own paths and our own ways together. So, moderately emotional because these are legitimately great times and great moments. I really enjoy these people. So yeah, it just kind of sucks and it makes me kind of wonder I thought what I was doing was fair because I was just hustling and doing a lot of different jobs and working in college. I guess just the stakes were different for me, but and I knew there was similar things you're willing to let a couple more things slide because of your particular condition in life, whether or not you have parents to lean on or resources, privileges of any kind, and those things and caring about a mission and things being mission driven. All those things kind of lead into this, and so those are all things where you're giving the benefit of the doubt, and we've talked about that for a long time, and especially that kind of reaction. I'm curious about how you reacted to that, and also continuing the conversation we were just having earlier about this, which is a really great conversation we're having. It's really telling the full picture of this. But I want to understand when you were able to okay, I can no longer give the benefit of the doubt because I'm starting to hear, I think we were talking about, you were starting to foment is kind of a harsh word, but resow the seeds of another union effort at TYT among the editors. And, eventually that would lead up to the crew, I guess. And then, we'll get to that in a moment as well. But were other people experiencing these things as well?
I don't have confirmation about exactly someone experiencing my precise conditions. I don't know of anybody who was also called part-time while working full-time. You know, obviously there's
Me neither.
but yeah, and your question, by the way, from me to you, just to seed it for you, is like, I'm fascinated to hear what other TYT workers, what they observed or heard or experienced regarding the union, either before it came forward, which was unlikely anybody else heard about it except those of us doing it, although maybe. But then when it came out, it definitely had to have been a major topic of conversation around the office. So I just want you to answer that in a little bit. I'm just giving you the heads up so your brain noodles it.
Can I answer that now?
Yeah, answer it now. Go ahead. It's your show.
Yeah, I'm super.
Yeah.
Look how you just jujitsu'd me right there.
I was just setting it up for later. I mean, you know, I was just letting it.
No.
Yeah,
no,
I'm fascinated by this.
I think it's really relevant. So
Yeah.
You know, in your documentary, which I think folks should really watch and check out, the sourcing, a lot of it's you know, Politico and, you know, legal documents that are public record. So I really encourage folks to really check that out and vet it for themselves.
Can I interrupt there?
Yeah.
There's 4 articles written, Huffington Post, in these times, the New Republic, and Politico, all did very well researched, thorough, good journalists. Like Cenk is interviewed in 3 of them. Anonymous staffers are interviewed in, I think, all of them. They were afraid of retaliation from their boss, who then did a retaliation-filled union busting drive. But like, those 4 articles are great starting points. They're on my Substack. You can just search them. They're all over my Twitter. And
link in the description.
Yeah. So like that's a good starting point if you're not wanting me to be your primary source for this story. Cenk is not refuting those details. And then just to sort of fill it in, like, Cenk becomes a politician in November, and that of course changed his leverage conditions slightly, quite a bit. And then the union comes forward in February, and then the union busting begins like 9 days later, after February 12th, as the union came forward, and then February 21st is when everything hit the fan publicly. So now it's all sort of like this big poop splatter. That's what hits the fan, and so this is the time period in which I'm curious, actually all of the time period to which other people from TYT might have perceived it. So that's this, just to fill the audience in on the timeline towards the union busting.
Totally. So, it's interesting. If you want to go really back forward, so
what does that mean?
It's one of those Californian things, like no yes or yes no, where like it made sense in my head, but whatever. If you want to go really far back to like tell the story, I guess, to move forward, I guess is where my brain was going.
Yeah.
We mentioned Jimmy Dore. To complete the loop, Hank, you were working with Jimmy Dore, both like affiliated with TYT and non-affiliated with TYT for a moment. While Jimmy Dore was doing a show on TYT, both like a show for their TV channel that they were doing on like YouTube TV and a couple others, and Aggressive Progressives, which is their member show.
I was the editor.
I got to produce that, the privilege. But I also got to produce Damage Report with John Adirola, No Filter with Anna Kasparian, which is another like short-lived show with the namesake. And that eventually got me to producing the main show and then special coverage during 2018, 2019, and 2020, respectively. So I really got a lot of close attention with all of them. Didn't get along nicely with Jimmy Dore, as I'm sure you are aware, Hank, with intimately, and I have talked about on my own channel as well. Of course, people can check that out. It's pretty easy to find. And I had my own qualms with the working conditions, but I was, just out of college. For what it was working for me. I think Hasan had publicly said around that time that he was getting paid around like $60K, and that was around like roughly my pay too. Honestly, to be honest, it might have been a little bit more. And to be honest, I think that's justified based on the amount of work Hasan was doing. Not saying he wasn't doing any work, just saying I was definitely doing more. And and not just that a couple K more, but I enjoyed working with Hasan, like, as much as I say, and like, I do bust nuts with him because this is the relationship we had. I was kind of known as the Hasan whisperer at the office because a lot of people would get annoyed with giving him instructions, and I would just yell at him and he would get annoyed and yell at me back, and eventually he would just do it. But like, we wouldn't be mad at each other. That was just our interface. But politically, we understood each other. And so after Jimmy Dore had kind of had this like crashing out with TYT and started his own thing originally and stopped doing aggressive progressives, this is when, after he had snapped at Francesca Fiorentini, a lot of other, dramatic things were happening at that time. We wanted to do another member show. Hasan got the gig. I was Hasan's producers at the time for the Facebook videos, and so Hasan wanted me to executive produce. The very first episode of Agitation Propaganda, aka Agitprop, was
great
Hasan.
graphics. Love the graphics on it. Really beautiful.
Great graphics package.
Yeah.
Shout out to the team for doing that. Carlos, I want to say, he did a lot of work for that. The very first episode, if folks go back, was Hasan Piker debating Cenk on the validity of unions and democracy in the workplace.
Right, capitalism. Yeah.
Yes.
The Wharton Business School vampire arguing capitalism.
It was capitalism versus socialism.
And that actually brings us to, I guess, the second point that I wanted to get to in this conversation, which is, if you believe that democracy works in the level of governance, why don't you believe that we can implement democracy in the workplace, especially considering that adults spend 80% of their entire lives inside of these corporations, and these corporations are absolutely authoritarian in its structure. Yeah. There is a top-down power structure, and that contributes significantly to alienation. That is, again, a consequence of the class antagonism that I mentioned before, and the fact that wealth is concentrated at the top, and they are allowed to do this. But the worst part about this is that we take it for granted. We assume that this is the norm when it should not be the norm, and that's my point. And that's one way to transition into a true democracy where we are where we are getting more democratic outcomes within the workplace through commodity production, and then ultimately through the drastic wealth redistribution that occurs as a consequence of that will help us gain, like us American workers, gain more dignity and more power and become better equipped to argue for their own interests.
Okay, so there's a lot of layers to that, and we'll go through them one by one. First of all, it depends on the type of company that you have. First layer is the size of the company. So if you have a very large company that is incredibly profitable, well, then you have less, let's put it this way, and it's a funny way of putting it, but less excuse not to share it with your employees, with the community, et cetera. You're just doing that to maximize profit. And they colloquially call it greedy, but I'm going to explain in a second that it's built into the coding, and so it's almost mandatory. If you're a smaller company, well, it's a matter of survival. So when we were talking the original example of the 24 and the 30 and all that, well, you're just trying to get to break even, and that's a completely different dynamic. Okay, but that's less important. The more important distinction is private companies versus public companies. So a private company run by a founder or a CEO, et cetera, can really do whatever it wants. And he could say to its investors, it could say to different things, hey, this is how much I'm going to share with the employees, and it becomes more discretionary. Once you become a public company, you do not have a choice anymore. You must maximize profit at all costs. Otherwise, you will be removed from your position.
Yeah, your fiduciary responsibility, it's literally built in. It's almost like, once again, that like every facet of even our legal institutions are protecting the interests of, as you say, the donor class, or as I would say, capital owners.
So I think there's a huge difference between donor class and capital owners. But in this case, even within capital owners, the public corporations must be reformed. They're what led to corporatism. So if you set up the rules as we have them currently today in America, and you say you have no other concerns, no other stakeholders, you don't have to worry about your community, you don't have to worry about your workers, your only directive, and we built it into the law. We built it, because what is a company? A company is a legal fiction. It is something that we created as a state. In a democracy, at some point, we said there has to be this thing called a company so that it's limited liability and not everybody who works there is liable for what the company does. So that is necessary. But then when you turn them into public corporations and you write into the code there's no other factors. You must make every single cent that you can. Well, then they're going to crush everything in their path. And that's what leads to capture of the government. That's what leads to paying your workers as little as possible. They get them to the breaking point. And so that is exactly what you're combating and what I agree with you on, Haas, okay?
Well, private corporations, again, though, still have that same inappropriate power dynamic. And it's not like wealthy people are offering more wages or offering like more benefits to their employees out of the kindness of their heart.
Yeah, so let's do those two.
It can happen.
That's right. That's right.
But
so
that's not the norm. So obviously someone has to apply pressure to ensure that even private corporations does that. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen, and it hasn't happened. And my point there is that it hasn't happened because, again, the wealthy have built this system in every institution.
Okay, so there's 4 layers to that. Let's try to break it down. There's public corporations. We agree on public corporations. Yeah. They're fundamentally wrong in their infrastructure, in their setup, in their conception even, okay? Mm-hmm. So then there's private corporations, and you're right that there is a range there. So a person could be a good employer and share a lot with their employees. Actually, ironically, Howard Schultz, who's terrible on politics, is actually a pretty good boss. And has shared a lot more with his employees than other corporations have chosen to do. And it's partly because he's a founder. Even if when they became a public corporation, he retained enough power to be able to be decent to not only his employees, but to the farmers that he works with in Latin America, et cetera. It's so ironic because he seems like such a jerk right now publicly. But anyway, in a private corporation, you do have a range. But once you have the range, you're right. There'll be plenty of people at the top who go, no, I'm not going to share with my employees at all. I'm going to maximize every penny because I want to, right?
None of the processes that you mention are actually democratic, and that's precisely what I'm saying.
That's right.
The workers are not making, the workers are not making democratic decisions in who they choose as their managers, or the workers are not making democratic decisions.
I got you. I'm getting to that. So, so the first category, you can't have democracy in the workplace by definition, and the second category, you potentially could, but most don't. The third category is, I think, what you're advocating for, some sort of more. Well, let me put it this way. It exists in the world. Like in Germany, there are boards where there's a management board and a supervisory board. The supervisory board is made up, depending on the size of the company, of 1/3 labor or even half labor. If the company is larger, it can be 50% of the board is controlled by labor. So that's a situation that says it's no longer optional. We're now saying some degree of democracy is mandatory at work. And if you set it up right, and I think the Germans largely have, well, that could work really, really great. And that's how you change the rules to get to the outcomes that you want. I think the fourth layer is when you then have the employees completely run the company. And I think, we'll talk about it more, but I think I'm totally opposed to that.
I think you are totally opposed to that. Otherwise, we would be running a cooperative corporation right now. My point was and still is, that no matter how you cut it, like, we have completely accepted this reality that, of course, it's not going to be a democratic process in the corporations, inside of the workplace. And that is shocking to me. That has always been shocking to me, and it's still shocking to this day to me that no one's like, wait a minute, we want to have a democracy, like we're advocating for a democracy and governance, but for some reason, we spend most of our lives in this place, and there is no democratic process where I don't get to figure out what I think is best for the company, or sit down with other people that even know better than me and like make the best possible choices, but have some sense of agency within my work that I'm creating. And that's obviously due to division of labor as well, but there are ways to mitigate that alienation, and we're not doing that. And one way of doing that is democratizing the workplace, which I think is a good first step towards higher levels of socialization, and then ultimately a drastic reorganization of our economy. We are going to go to a break.
Hold on. Let me just say one thing before we go
2 minutes?
to that. Yes, before we go to that. Look, guys, so I believe in some form of democracy in the workplace, and it's a balancing act. So in America, we have B Corps and benefit corporations, and that's a slightly different balancing act, and one that's really worthy to look at. And so, and I think that between that and the German example, there are some things that where we can get to a better balancing act, way better balancing act than we have here. But I think our fundamental disagreement, which we'll talk more about in the next hour, is I think there are many situations, including work, where a democracy doesn't necessarily make sense. So it's an interesting rhetorical point, and even one that is beyond rhetorical. It's an interesting point, period, that we should discuss, and that's why we're doing this. But you can certainly concede that there are situations like team sports, the military, where a democracy doesn't work. Hey guys, are we going to take the hill or are we not going to take the hill? Well, let's have a vote. Okay, well, if you have a vote, nobody's going to go take the hill, right? Let alone the fact that there'll be chaos. So it depends. Is a company more like the military or is a company more like the government?
Yes, commodity production is a little different.
I have a history in my own personal life of like figuring out exactly what the line is, and like writing that, not in like especially when it comes to authority, let's say, like not for people's boundaries or whatever, but like definitely for authority, and especially what I think is like unjust or authority or like unjustifiable of authority, or even inconvenient authority for me, and so I was like, I don't really know what was going on in any sort of these things. Maybe I'd heard whispers, but I can't even remember anything right now that's really concrete. I was just like, in general, the audience for this on TYT, this is going to be something that is at the time much more left and much more abashedly left than what they're talking about. Because you have some old clips about Cenk talking about being pro-union, but you didn't really hear it in a capitalism versus socialism context. You didn't really hear it in the systems context. Now, when you hear in 2024, Cenk and Anna rail about, all the far left wants to do is just destroy all of these systems. Like, it was agitprop, Hasan and I, bringing TYT's audience away from the sort of like, idiotic Jimmy Dore, like I hate this thing or that thing, like self-victimizing thing, right? And into, okay, here's an actual structural analysis for things that are beyond the Democratic Party, beyond this sort of like democratic capitalism, the capitalists will be fine, Elizabeth Warren stuff that honestly Cenk and Anna were doing at the time, that found some power in Bernie because Bernie found some power, but otherwise really didn't have some weight beneath the surface, right? It was a really shallow pool, to be honest, of like ideology and analysis. So we brought that there, and the number one audience of that was going to be, okay, yeah, the members and the people who were watching live. And then we made the clip, and the clip I think is still online on the main channel. Yeah. But the first people who are going to be watching that are the crew and the editors and the producers and the executives, because it was the first episode, and Cenk and Cenk and his nephew were debating. It was like nepotism island, but I remember certain executives in the control room, and they were making executive points, and I knew that it was a radicalizing moment for a lot of people who were watching that down the pipeline in the production team. And so, yeah, I was very deliberately planting a seed. I didn't know, like, I was not coordinated. It was not planned, but I knew that it would have multiple audiences. It would have an audience to TYT's viewers, and it would also have an audience to TYT's staff on all levels. I didn't know what that was going to be, but that was in August of 2018 or 19, I want to say.
I think it was 2019. I recall
it was 2019.
being
I think it was
interested to
2019.
watch this first episode of Agitprop. Hasan's profile had changed substantially from my first time period working at TYT. So, he was already a much bigger deal by then. You okay? What happened?
No, there's like some thing making noise outside.
Okay.
It's like a vehicle.
Your eyes just went. I was like, oh no. So, but I recall being there, I think, when it came up. But I mean, the things that they were going on about in the video or stuff I was living literally as someone who was secretly unionizing at the Young Turks, right? So like,
and you got to hear Cenk's responses in real time in a way that was shielded by the fact that he was talking to his nephew.
Right.
And to me, that was by design. Yeah. And I think because, like, I wasn't saying, hey, Hasan, let's get your uncle's employees to unionize, right? Like, that wasn't my idea. I was still like, this is going to have a broad audience, and these are things that Hasan was learning and grappling with, and ideas that he was, forming for himself, and ideas that I was fresh from learning and off in college and continuing to build and expand upon. It was like a great experience for us. I love all the work that we did for that. It's one of my favorite things we got to do at TYT. And then it only got one season, and then a couple of months later, Hasan got let go. I think the same wave that you did. So
same day.
Yeah. So, and to fast forward to that, whenever Cenk is announced for announces he's running for Congress.
Yeah, this is an important moment in this whole story.
Yeah, he hadn't told anyone like publicly on the staff. Maybe he had told some like executives and some close people, but to my understanding, I was the person who broke the news in the newsroom, because one of my journalist friends reached out to me because a bot on Twitter that just reports on filings had said that Cenk Uygur had filed for the 25th district or whatever. And I was like, what?
November 13th, 2019.
And so I'm in the office and I turn around to some unnamed people and I'm like, what? And these unnamed people are editors, producers, hosts, staff, the security guy, like fucking everybody. We're all like, I don't really know who had the inside information. It must have been Cenk and some other people who kept it really hush hush. But most of us were like, what?
And nobody knew that I knew. It was a surprise to everybody.
That was when kind of like the straws started breaking the camel's back for me, where I was like, I had known that Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian and frankly everyone working on there and everyone who lives in the city of Los Angeles with goals of making it in media has some sort of like axe to grind and an ego, and like that is a thing that works there, and I am one of them, right? Of course. But that's when I started to realize that this person who was at one time a CEO, at one time a host, and also someone with political aspirations, which is great, but ambitions that are just like a lot to weigh for one person just to do, and a lot of those goals contradict with each other, because if you want to be a hard-hitting or really good pundit, you may end up saying some things that are gonna pretty much disqualify you from running for office, right? I would love to live in the world where Hasan saying America deserved 9/11 like that blatantly and clearly in 4K is not disqualifying for you to run for president or whatever. Not saying like Hasan for president, but like there could be worse options for politicians. And I'm on this tip about like, just because we're on screens and we're streamers, do not like Trumpify us and assume that, oh, we're entertainers, therefore we're qualified politicians. All right. But I'm just saying that like it was around that time where I was starting to see he is caring a lot more about his political ambitions than he is about the company's prospects for whatever reason. At least that was the feeling that I was getting. Yeah. And, by definition, the company's prospects, the prospects of, okay, am I building a career here? Or is this going to be what I have in my Twitter bio currently, the graveyard of 2010s digital media, right? And so Hasan leaves, some other people I enjoy leave, you leave. I hear about the union things.
February 2020.
I was brought into a meeting because I was suspected of organizing or being a part of organizing it.
When? And I need slow down. Tell me every detail, man. This is amazing.
I'm not sure how much I want to talk about this.
Okay.
But I will say that after producing a show, I was called into a meeting by someone higher up in the network, and I was asked about if I had heard about these things. And I was kind of like pretty sure I was leaving. And so I had like, tried to organize like a get together type thing. But I also knew that like, the election and all the stuff that was going on was like burning people out, and I'd had good times with these people. So I wanted to like have some good time, like the last couple of weeks I was there. And I hadn't fully made my decision, but I had some offers in other places. I was a news producer, and so I was hearing about COVID since December, and I was like, this is about to go real left.
Yeah.
Through some of the, things I was seeing and the rumblings of the union, which, by February I announced. By November, Cenk runs for office. And between there's a whole window, which I think your documentary kind of shows, where there's a warping of every bad thing happening to him as a result of that campaign and challenging the establishment. And so within that reality, you could kind of see the writing on the wall of like, okay, the things are coming apart. Plus, I was in the whole thing for pushing a leftist agenda. And I felt like I was running my limits of pushing this network as left as I could possibly do it as one person who was really involved with it, especially with Hasan gone. And that meeting did it for me.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I have principles about unions and workers' rights. I come from a union family. That matters to me. And the idea that I would be, I won't really say like maybe it was an intimidation tactic on paper. I didn't feel intimidated because I was just like, okay, yeah, you know what? I am pro-union. I care about unions. Yeah, I know there's some rumblings about some stuff going on. I actually know quite a lot.
This is February. This is
This
after
is early. This is early
mid-February?
February and before like the announcement, a couple days before.
Yeah. Okay.
Before the captive meeting, I'll say that.
Yeah. So this is between February 9th and February 21st. The February 9th is when the official letter was delivered, from IATSE or something like that. And that's also when the TYT Union Twitter account went live with the first announcement.
That's around that time, yes.
Yeah.
And so I had to remind this person that as a producer, I would not be covered by IATSE in this union particular effort.
Yep.
I am pro-union, but I have a lot of work on my plate, as this person would be very aware of. And so there would be no way that I would be able to do all of this work for something that I would not directly benefit from. And I'm just being fair. I wish I were more noble than that. I wish I had the ability to do more than that at that time. But at that time, I was very burned out and kind of looking for a way out. And,
everybody there feels that.
Yeah, I definitely would have felt more effort to support it if it was something that I would have been able to benefit from, like in the nearer term. But also, to be fair, I wasn't included in the conversations because it was very on the hush hush, and I wasn't going to be involved in it. So yeah, I didn't know. I reminded that person about that, and I was like, yeah, let's be real. Like, I don't like the vibe and smell of this conversation, honestly.
Good for you.
I think 1 or 2 days later, I turned in my resignation, and I didn't say exactly why at the time because I will admit that maybe this is like a moral failing for me to like not say more about why I was leaving at the time. I left and like gave in my resignation 2 days later. When the union stuff was officially announced, I was, again, not necessarily, I was a pseudo host and producer, so call me what you wanted to, but I was the first, or like one of the first people, was like either me or Emma, who like quote tweeted it and said that like through our support by it, at least like vocally. I think John Iderola may have like retweeted it or something, but there was a lot of, host surprise and shock from people who like weren't intimately aware of that, because there were, moments of friction between producers and editors, but we're very intimately aware of Emma and I as producers and editors of what you're going through. And, we had those values of being pro-union even then.
Is it
right? And
Emma Vigland, or is there a different Emma you mean?
Emma Vigland, correct.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah. And so I remember doing that on Twitter, but I was like, I have the privilege to leave. I have the foresight to leave. And I was there to push left things. I saw the great rat fucking of 2024, where Bernie Sanders was losing in the Democratic primaries coming. And I was like, there's no way this is going to happen. This is going to be a very bleak next couple of years plus. I need to find ways of engaging in politics that are not this. Maybe it's media, maybe it's not. 4 years later, here we are.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a decision I made. My last day was my birthday, the leap birthday, 29th of February, 2020. That was the South Carolina primary. Bernie got mollywopped. That was right before Super Tuesday. Bernie
March
got mollywopped.
Cenk,
And then
Cenk
on
lost
March
both.
4th,
Yeah.
Cenk lost the primary. There's apparently, as was reported, a retaliatory firing that happened around that time too for someone who was union organizing.
The morning
And-
after he loses, the guy's a politician who owns a media company running for Congress, and they made a big, I show this in the movie, like they made a big show of promising to live up to ethical standards of separating editorial and business decisions. That's when they made, and for both times Cenk has been a politician for his presidential run and congressional run, Jack became the acting CEO. So his chief operations officer, Jack, was the CEO of this time. And so we're supposed to believe that they weren't making business decisions in line with their political decisions, because that would violate ethical standards. The ethical standards Cenk applied to himself, yet he waits till the morning after the election loss to fire a guy who was part of the union organizing bargaining unit. Like, come on, are we supposed? Come on, I mean, like that's at least circumstantial at most, or at the very least. So
it's a shame because I was gone, so I have no firsthand knowledge. I only have speculation from this point, and secondhand, thirdhand knowledge. But I can say, to roughly paraphrase what I said, at that point, TYT had reached Cenk's, I think kind of outdated, but his dreams of he was on platforms where any regular person could feasibly choose between him and Fox News and CNN and MSNBC. He was on TV channels. He was on the internet. He was on all these different platforms. He was even able to be a contributor on CNN at the time. He was going on these shows very often. He had all the attention he wanted. He was running for office for the first time. More on that.
He got booked. He got booked on the Damage Report a couple of times, and 4 times on his own show.
No, but he was booked on CNN.
As a candidate.
I remember a lot,
Yeah.
like leading up to the election at least, and all of it's just everyone who worked there was so talented, and there are people that Cenk or people who worked very closely with him kept an environment of believing in people, and we're all a little bit rough around the edges for sure. Absolutely. But we all had this interest in the politics and compassion for, and true compassion for it. And it was when the rubber met the road about okay, how can we live it? How can we make sure people are being treated properly? That even though I was privileged with, I just could not live with, I work with you all, and I'm also with people and around people who are making decisions or doing things that are just actively against what they have heard are your needs, what you're asking for, to be able to continue to put out quality work, to move even further than that. And so that's at least to my long part of answering your story. There's definitely we have time to talk about more of it as well, and I have a couple more questions to get to as well. But
great.
Right?
Yeah,
that's the reaction I'm waiting.
I went to law school in Arkansas, and one of the I got in a relationship with Minnie Jean Brown's little sister, Phyllis Brown, who's not little to me. She's like my mother's age, and she was super radical. She was, their family were, used to hide the Panthers, and people forget about the radical nature of Arkansas and the folk in Arkansas, the black folk in Arkansas, and that Arkansas sent more people back to Africa with the Black Star Network created by Garvey than any other state in this country. But and Phyllis used to tell me about how integration took her other sandwiches, like people talking about how black teachers, when these people went to these integrated schools, they didn't just take any black student, they took the brightest and these so-called model students, and then they got over there, they didn't get the extra sandwich or the extra books that they used to get when they were in black schools. So it actually, when you said that, it's not only is the worst sandwich, it's less than what you had over in the other train cart.
Damn. Yeah. It's we can get into the analogies all day. It's real fun. I love that we can reflect this.
I like the train one. It's let's keep going with this.
As my late great friend Michael Brooks used to say, see, he's right here on my shirt. Shout out Letterhack. Here's the pitch. Members got to experience the ideas you just heard first, with extra minutes and with fewer interruptions. Interviews with Mondale Robinson, J.R. Jackson, Jason Miles, and more are waiting for you. The future won't wait, so make yourself included. We can't build without you. And by we, I mean our initial members across YouTube, Twitch, and Syndicate23.co, including Shargoon at the Syndicalist level and the Anti-Corporatist at the Stingray level. Thank you so much for your support. Moderator Pinkerbell leading the Scorpions, Logan Hill, Cy Abelman, Danielle Capone, Benjamin Morrill, John Lucuyer, Lena P, Stoneflower Dragon, Hamather Sig, Mouse in the Dragon Onesie, Squishmallow Dragon, Late Bloomer 66, Mobile Newman, and all the Syndicate 23 day ones, including Bowen, Lisa, Daniel, another one, Carrie, Lori, and the discount Seth Rogen. Look at what we're building together. Thank you for seeing the vision. The power is always within you. Cheers.